to the Magical Learning Podcast. As you can see from the title today, we have a guest, Amy Jacobson. But before we start, Amy, we actually don't start with our questions. We always ask everyone, how's their week been? So how's your week been?
Yeah, actually, I was just saying to somebody before, it's been a super exciting week. So it's been a big one. We had the book officially comes out next week, but earlier on this week, oh, thank you, she's so pretty. Um, we actually had the book launch party in Perth on Tuesday night, so that was amazing. It was a lot of family and friends and a lot of close clients there as well. So we had a great big party and just a bit of a dance actually, just to because I think you're never too old to dance, right?
Correct. Correct. I love it.
How about you, Jeanette? How's your week been?
My week's been awesome. I've actually been at home this week. I live on a farm, Amy, so it's actually really nice to have some time at home. So that's
Yeah,
been great. Thank you. Thank you
excellent. Do
for
you have
asking.
animals?
Hares and guinea fowl and the
Is
occasional
that
bee
right?
and stuff. Yeah, but the land around us, my cousin owns, so he has cattle and sheep and stuff, depending on the
Yeah,
season.
okay.
Yeah,
Oh, nice,
thank you.
nice.
So let's start with the questions. And we always love to know a little bit about your journey to where you are today. And then we'll talk about the book.
Yeah, beautiful. So my background, I've always been fascinated with the mind. My initial fascination with the mind was around criminology and forensics. So I had a real I guess really inquisitive to think how people's minds could be so messed up and be so different to do such terrible things. But I get quite emotively connected. So I realized it wasn't going to be healthy for me because it was very hard to detach from what I was hearing and what I was looking at or reading. So I actually went down the corporate path. I was in corporate world for over 19 years, and I really enjoyed my corporate career. I enjoyed being an employee. I've never really had that desire to be self-employed and run my own business. But as I was kind of going through that corporate career, the fascination with the mind was still there. And I realized that there was also this really powerful side of the mind, right? In that if we got it right and we really leveraged the way that the mind was wired, that performance can just skyrocket for one, but also the difference that it makes in a workplace in that your competitors can copy your products, your services, all of that kind of stuff. But what they can't replicate is your people. So when you get people that are happy doing what they're doing, that enjoy coming to work, that where that emotional intelligence is being tapped into, it completely changes the output and it completely changes the actual going to work for people as well. So it was once I started to kind of look at that and realize that, the pockets, the corporate organization that I was working in, going into different pockets of the organization where performance was either low or market engagement was low or, people were underperforming and really started to work with them. It was rarely the technical side that was lacking. It was the emotional intelligence side that was lacking.
I love that. What a great journey. And you and I have very similar interests around the brain and the mind. So happy
Oh,
to see
really?
you get
I
on a great
like that. You're a minder, just like me, Danette.
exactly. So my next question is, tell us a little bit about your book. And I'm just going to hold it up for our viewers because we have viewers as well as listeners. So
Yep.
this is Amy's new book, The Emotional Intelligence Advantage, coming out next week.
Yes.
Amy, tell us about your book.
Yeah, I'm very proud of her. She looks so pretty and clean.
Should be.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. So this is my second book, and my first book was very much around the simplicity side of emotional intelligence. So it was written about 5 years ago when we were really trying to challenge the market. The market out there wasn't ready for emotional intelligence. So the first book was all about simplifying what it is and how to develop it and how just some really clear, simple actions to put it in place for trying to tap into that emotional intelligence. This one here takes it up a level. So this one here is heavily focused for aspiring leaders or executive positions. And this is getting into those areas that we tend to avoid as human beings. So that mastering of change and the difficult conversations are those areas that are very prevalent in everything that we do. This book is heavily related to the workplace. The first one was also heavily related to the workplace, but a lot of people took so much out of it for their life outside, where this one, the specific examples tend to be workplace related.
Yeah.
And
And it's
it's just really challenging, I guess, human beings to have those conversations, to understand how change works in our mind, but also to know what it takes to be a great leader, what it takes to be a great human being, and how to build that trust and high performance.
love it. There's a biplane going over the top of my house.
Oh, love it.
The joys of living on a farm. So, Amy, yeah, I love your book. I love the timing is perfect at the moment because there is so much change going on and organisations are having to have difficult conversations. So one
Mhm.
of the things I'd love for you to share is a little bit about more about the emotional intelligence advantage.
Yeah, beautiful. So the emotional intelligence advantage is being able to understand what happens in our mind and the process that we go through when we are faced with things such as change and difficult conversations. So what I've broken the book down into is really around the emotional intelligence process. And that is taking those 5 core concepts of emotional intelligence, but also understanding that we go through a process in our head and that process has 5 steps. And these 5 steps not just align to emotional intelligence, but they align to every single situation. They align to our change intelligence, which is, knowing what is happening in our mind when change is occurring, but also heading into those difficult conversations. So when I call it the advantage, it's the fact of realizing it's that balance between IQ and EQ, right? That you can only get so far with each one of them. And you've really got to bring that emotional intelligence into the picture and not be avoiding it and not being actually just full steam ahead trying to push things onto people.
Yeah. Yeah, and I love that. And I love the fact that you talk about that balance between IQ and EQ rather than going, this is a solution for everyone. We
Yeah,
need
it's
both.
not.
Because you can be highly, as you said in the book, you can be highly emotionally intelligent, but there's a point where you also need that IQ to kick in, particularly obviously
That's
as you
right.
speak in, going up through the ranks in organisations. So I love that
Yeah,
point. So a
absolutely.
couple of things that I'm curious about. And first one, and I've certainly experienced this, and I'm sure you have too, is what are the problems that are caused by leaders who don't invest in growing their emotional intelligence?
Yeah. I think the key thing is that you get detachment, right? You get people that don't want to be there. They're at work because they feel like they have to be there rather than choosing to be there. They lack direction, and you end up with a real distrust in there as well. Like we know that human beings, when we're interacting, the key thing that creates any relationship is trust. And when you have got leaders that are not tapping into their emotional intelligence, we lose that trust and therefore we lose that feeling of psychological safety. So we really limit ourselves and we hold ourselves back from what we can do. We lose that curiosity, that creativity, that we basically become like a shell of ourselves and become like a robot. It's when you have people coming in on autopilot and just doing the least that they have to do to get through the day to get that pay packet at the end. And I think that is evident in too many workplaces. And that is why, I always say I can walk into an organization where the culture overall is amazing, but there are still pockets whereas it is toxic. And that is where those leaders in those certain pockets are not tapping into their emotional intelligence. And the same thing, I walk into a culture that's incredible, a culture that's really quite toxic. And then you also have pockets where the actual culture is brilliant because the leaders are tapping into that emotional intelligence.
Yeah. And we like to share this with our listeners and viewers, but I'm sure you do too, about the fact that these are skills people can learn.
Absolutely. I really believe it's not a personality trait. I do believe that some people are actually born with higher levels of emotional intelligence. I do absolutely believe that. But I believe that everybody has the ability to be emotionally intelligent. And it is a skill, the same as everything else in life. And in every situation, we have a choice to make. We can either choose to respond in an emotionally intelligent way or choose not to. And you know what? Sometimes we get it right and sometimes we get it wrong. And I teach this kind of stuff and I don't always get it right either. So, but it's how we choose to respond in those situations when we don't get it right. That is the true strength of our emotional intelligence.
I love the bit in your book where your daughter sometimes points that out to you.
She does. And my son's even caught on to it now too. So every now and then they're like, Mum, that wasn't very emotionally intelligent, was it? But you know what? Like that, and they're right. And I think it's at times like that it's a reflection to me, because it means that I've got in my own head, I've let my emotional brain take over and I've responded without any logic in play. So yeah, sadly, sometimes our kids are right.
I love that. So can you share your 5-step process using an example so people can sort of learn about the process?
Sure. Let's use an example of a difficult conversation, right? So we'll use the process to the emotional intelligence process. And this emotional intelligence process rolls through absolutely everything that we do. So it's not just evident in difficult conversations, not just evident in changes, it's evident in every interaction. So the first step of the process is own it. And when we're looking at a difficult conversation, we have got to get to the point where we own the fact that this conversation has to happen. So, whatever's led to it, and it's completely normal for us as human beings to want to avoid that conversation, to hope that it goes away by itself or sweep it under the carpet or make it somebody else's problem. But in order to progress and move forward, we have to get to the point where we own the fact, own the reality of the situation, own the role that we're playing in this as well, to know that this difficult conversation has to happen. So that is step one. Step two is when we go to face it. Now, face it is when we face all of those emotions that start to come up. So in a difficult conversations, those emotions are huge, right? Because it is, I'd be worried if there was anybody out there that said they loved having difficult conversations, because I'd be really concerned, to be fair. We don't tend to like confrontation. So when we go into this, what tends to happen in that face it area, our emotions kick in, and quite often it's the trigger of our fight or flight mechanism in our amygdala. So we get to that point where we either go into flight mode and we want to get out of there and just ignore it, or we get into fight mode and our fear kicks in. And the reason for this is this is a protection mechanism in us, right? That we know that this natural protection mechanism in our mind that way back in the early ages was there so we didn't get eaten by lions, today is more aligned to so we don't end up in a situation where we feel confronted or we feel uncomfortable. So at this point in face it, this own it and face it, we are 100% in our own head, and we tend to loop in this area in the emotions that are saying, we're really going to do this, but no, I don't want to. I don't know how they're going to respond. And what if they respond like this? And what if they say this? And what if they judge me in this way? And, it's all about us. We're thinking, what about, how is this going to impact me? So those first two steps, 100% in our own head. And at that face it, we have got to understand the fact that there's no such thing as a good or bad emotion. What there is appropriateness and severity levels. And every one of those emotions that are happening for a reason. So facing that and understanding what is driving this emotion, where is it coming from, and being able to process and even voice it and acknowledge it to be able to make sure we can process it, because we don't want to unpack our bags and stay there. So that is step two. Then we go into step three. Step three is called feel it. And this is when we get out of our own head. This is when we realize, actually, this is not about me at all. This difficult conversation is actually not about me and my fears. It's about helping this other person to get to the right outcome. And I mean, you've got to know roughly what that outcome is, right? And you've got to start to understand, how are they feeling? Because quite often, people, as much as we don't like a difficult conversation, they're not going to like a difficult conversation either. And especially in the workplace, they're probably waking up every morning just dreading going to work, right? So at this point in time, we get out of our own head and we start to feel it. And we think, how is this person feeling right now? What emotions are evident with them? What are we seeing come out of them? Where is it coming from? And at this point, this is where empathy comes in. This is where empowerment comes in. This is where we understand that everybody's mind is wired slightly different. What makes us tick is slightly different. So, their values and beliefs are going to be different. So how we respond in this situation is going to be very different to how they respond in this situation. So it's at this point that we say, it's not about us. let me just monitor and see how this person is feeling. And with those difficult conversations, it's about actually recognizing what emotion are they feeling and how do we follow that emotion. So if I use a simple example here, which is so common that I have people say to me, my biggest fear in a difficult conversation in the workplace is that they're going to start crying. Biggest thing we fear, right? But having somebody get emotional and upset and cry in front of you is no different to somebody getting angry or somebody being happy. Or it's another form of emotion. It just happens to be more of a physically obvious emotion when somebody cries. But when we look at that in itself, when you dig deep into that, you know that when somebody is upset, it's usually embarrassment that hurts the most. Especially when you're in the workplace, you're embarrassed because you're crying, you're embarrassed because you're upset. So in that situation of feel it, then we go into the fourth step, right, which is ask it. And at this point in time, we say, okay, if this person is upset, they're clearly probably embarrassed right now. What is the best thing I can do for them right now? And when somebody is really embarrassed in a situation, the worst thing you can do is just keep them there and continue to make them feel embarrassed or harp on about that same thing. So how do you, this ask it is about asking the right questions and answering the questions that are asked of you. So how do you ask those right questions to help with the emotion that they're feeling? And this is where our logical brain kicks in, right? Which is somebody is upset. It is a logical thing to be able to let them have a break, to go and get a drink of water, to, be able to get out of that embarrassing situation for a moment and contain themselves and control their emotions. So this ask it area is all about making sure that we ask the right questions and we answer the questions that are being asked of us. The final step is the drive it. And this is where the action comes into play. So your drive it is your doing place, right? And quite often we think that, a bit of a misconception that emotional intelligence is all about the feeling and all about the emotions. But in order to be emotionally intelligent, we've got to be decisive and we've actually got to make progress. So this drive it is having the motivation and having the ability to know what it's going to take in order to progress forward. Like, what action is it? What part? How do we fix this? What are we going into next? What is it going to take in order to get through those next steps? So that is the 5-step process. And that 5-step process just continues, right? Because every time there is an interaction, you come back to the beginning and you've got to own the fact that that's how this person feels. That's what this person said. This is the circumstance now. How do I face the emotions that are coming up with that? How do I get out of my own head and feel them? How do I ask the right questions and answer the questions being asked? How do I drive it? So it's a constant process.
I love it. Love it. So, Amy, I'm really curious because we love to ask our authors, and given you've written 2 books, we love to understand your writing process because every author is different.
Yeah, mine is quite different, and I think it comes from the fact that while I have got 2 books that are published, and I'm classified as an author, I would never introduce myself as an author. I would always look and say I'm an emotional intelligence specialist who's just happened to write 2 books, and that's very much guided the way that I have written them. In that, my first book I wrote in a very quick period, so it probably would have been about 6 or 7 weeks it took me to write my first book, but that was simply because I'd been rolling out that information throughout programs for years. So it was just a matter of me sitting down like I was in front of an audience and just writing it rather than speaking it. The second book did take me a little bit longer, and second book is always harder to write, I think, because, they say everybody has one book in them. So when you get to that second book, it's kind of like, well, I put that in my first book. Can I put it in this one? And you've got to kind of link them as well, just in case somebody reads your second and hasn't read your first. But I think this book was more challenging because it went deeper. Yes. I had already been rolling out a lot of the content from this book over the last couple of years. So again, all of the research had pretty much been done, but pulling it together was more complex and making sure that I, referred to the first book at the right places, but also didn't make any assumptions for the reader. So this one took me around 3.5, 4 months to write. And it was a more challenging process. I think I described it to someone as, I feel like writing your first book is kind of like having a baby, in that the minute you go through the childbirth, you tend to forget how painful and how bad the childbirth was, right? And then you get to the second pregnancy and the second child, and you're thinking, what was I thinking? Kind of the same with books, right? Like, I feel like I wrote my first book, and then you get so caught up in the hype and the excitement and, the amazing things that come with writing a book, that when I decided to write my second book, I'd kind of forgotten about just how challenging it can be. And I said to my head my head editor, he said, "How are you doing it?" I said, "Oh, in my head, I kind of felt like once I got to the part I handed over the manuscript, that I was just kind of done. Like, the tough bit's done." But that's when the tough part actually starts.
Totally true. So we're just about at the end of the interview, which has gone really fast. But I'm curious, there's probably other things you'd like to share with our listeners and our viewers. And also I'll ask the second bit about where they can find you in a second. But anything else you'd like to share with the listeners and viewers?
Yeah, I look, my biggest thing to share with people when it comes to just emotional intelligence and when it comes to life in general, I would just encourage people to just slow down. Like, slow down. We are in such a frantic world at the moment where it seems the only acceptable way to be is busy. And I think that this is detrimental to us. It's detrimental to the way that our mind works. If we can slow down that little bit and understand that the logical brain and the emotional brain take time to kick in. And also, too, to understand that the expectations we're setting for ourselves these days are our biggest problem. And it's not so much other people's expectations on us, it's actually our own expectations on ourselves and how we've defined success. So I would really encourage people to just hit the pause button, really start to think about it, get a little bit more reflective in your life, and understand what success means for you. Because I think we probably live in a world where enoughness is quite tough for people to ever reach, and that's a shame. I think that when we can understand that success, as corny as it sounds, is happiness, and if you are happy, you're successful, and there's got to come a point in your life where you stop and actually start living rather than constantly craving and driving for that future person. So I think that's when we really tap into our emotional intelligence. That's when we really start to own things and go through that process and find the progression that we need in the workplaces, outside of the workplaces, in any interaction with human beings.
Love that advice, Amy. That's really wise advice for our listeners and viewers. Pay attention to that one. So, Amy, I know that our listeners and viewers, and I'm going to put the book up there again, The Emotional Intelligence Advantage, would probably want to reach out to you. So I'm curious, where can our listeners and viewers find you?
So my website is absolutely the best place to start. So on my website, you'll find links to everything. So both of my books on there are linked. If they want to look into purchasing them, you can connect with me through my website. You can connect with me on social media through my website as well. But also on my website is a whole lot of insight. So it's a whole lot of links to podcasts. It is videos. It is articles. So it's a great place to start, just to kind of, if you want to read more, or you want to understand more about emotional intelligence. And please, like I say it all the time, I love people. So I really enjoy when people reach out to me as well. So please, reach out. Come say hi.
I love that, Amy. Me too. I'm the same. We're so similar.
Yeah, yeah.
Amy, thank you so much for joining us today. I'm pretty sure we'll get you back for a team. So we also have team sessions with most of ML team members. So
Yep.
love to get you back for that too at
Sounds
some
great.
stage. Awesome. And to our listeners and our viewers, I'm just going to hold up Amy's book again, just so you can see.
This marketing is fantastic. I'm going to have to pay you for this today.
No, it's just a great book, and it's definitely skills we need at the moment. So to our listeners and viewers, we wish you a magical week.